to be humble, to be kind. It is a giving of the peace in your mind, to a stranger, to a friend, to give in such a way that has no end. We are love, we are one, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war, we are how we treat each other and nothing more. And to be bold, to be brave, it is the thinking that the heart can still be saved, and the darkness can come quick. The danger's in the anger and in the hanging on to it. We are love, we are one, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war, we are how we treat each other, nothing more. And tell me what it is that you see, a world that's full of endless possibility, and heroes don't look like they used to, they look like you do. We are love, we are one, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war, we are how we treat each other, nothing more. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. We are how we treat each other.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the UU Church of Berkeley. My name is Karen Elliott, and I'm one of 8 worship associates at UUCB, all of whom are going to participate in the worship service today as a way of welcoming to our pulpit the Reverend Michelle Collins, our new interim minister for the coming year. The theme for today's service is the stories and blessings we share. This is a welcoming congregation, and we trust that Reverend Michelle will come to know how we are always working to welcome and care for one another better. Whoever you are, we welcome you in the fullness of who you are. Please take a moment now to prepare yourself for our time together. You might get a candle and a way to light it so that you can join in the chalice lighting in a few moments. We want you to know that our video broadcasting team continues to work to improve the technological aspects of our virtual services. If you experience a technological difficulty during the live stream of this service, please message the UUCB Facebook page, and one of us will try to help you. Most of us are not professionals at this, and sometimes problems crop up that we just cannot control. Nevertheless, please know that we feel honored to create a time and space together with you for all of us to connect deeply with the sacred and with one another. Now, please join us in singing our opening song, number 112, Do You Hear?
Where you stand through the sky, through the land. Do you hear, do you hear? In the heights on the plain, in the vale on the main, in the sun, in the rain. Do you hear, do you hear? Through the roar, through the rush, through the throng, through the crush. Do you hear in the hush of your soul, of your soul? Hear the cry, hear what's still, hear the heart's all to will. Hear a sigh, startling trill in your soul, in your soul. From the place where you stand to the outermost strand, do you hear, oh my friend? Do you hear, do you hear? All the dreams, all the dares, all the sighs, all the prayers, they are yours, mine and theirs. Do you hear, do you hear?
Now, whether you are lighting the chalice or just the chalice in your heart, let us kindle our flames with the words of Audette Fulbright Folsom. This light we kindle is set in the lamp of our history. We inherit our free faith from the brave and gentle, fierce and outspoken hearts and minds that have come before us. Let us be worthy inheritors of this faith, and through our good works, pass it boldly to a new generation. I now invite you to share in the chat where you are by writing, "I carry the flame in," whatever town or city you are joining us from.
Please join with me in saying our covenant. Love guides this church. The quest for truth and justice is its common purpose. to give thanks, listen deeply, speak with care, honor our differences, and seek and grant forgiveness. These things we covenant with one another.
Hi, I'm Catherine Boyle, the Director of Family Ministry at UUCB. My pronouns are she, hers, hers, and this is a time for all ages. And this week, we are telling a fable. Now, a fable is a story from a long, long time ago that teaches us a lesson. And this particular fable is called The Birds. So now I invite all those young and young at heart to stick close and to type in "ka" in the comments when the crow and the story pause. So, with that, dun, 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 let's begin. Long ago, a hawk lived on top of a hill, and at the foot of the hill, there was a tree on which a crow lived. Now, this crow used to perch on a branch every day, and this crow was very silly and very foolish. He would imitate everyone, copying them. The hawk at the top of the hill would fly down every day in search of food, and the crow would watch the hawk circling the air for hours and swooping down when he saw his prey. The hawk was gifted with eyes that could see long, long distances. He could spot his prey from high atop the hill and then fly down and pounce upon them. Ah! The crow watched the hawk, thinking, "Ah! If the hawk can do that, I can do it too." What does he think? "Oh, one day I will show the hawk that I can do the same thing. I can fly just as good as him, maybe even better." A few days later, as the hawk was circling in the air, the crow decided to do the same. Suddenly, a rabbit came out of the bushes. The crow saw it, and then, the hawk saw it, and then the crow too saw the rabbit. But before the crow could move, the hawk swooped down and caught a hold of the rabbit and flew away. Swoosh was all the crow heard as the hawk disappeared with his prey. The crow thought, "That's no great skill. Anyone can do that." The next moment, he spotted a big mouse coming out of a hole. Without wasting time, the crow swooped down, and like the hawk, he tried to catch the mouse in his claws. But the mouse saw the crow and ran away. Ah! And then, the crow crashed against the hill. Ah! The crow cried out in pain. Just then, the hawk came flying down and landed by the crow. It said to him, I hope you know it's not easy to hunt, and it's not always easy to imitate either. We all have our special talents and abilities, said the hawk, and then flew away. Thereafter, the crow never imitated anyone else in his life. He was happy just to be himself. So in the comment box, you could add any more crows, but I'd like you to write what you think the lesson of the story is. There's so much going on in this world, and sometimes we want to be like our heroes and our role models. And that's good, but we always have to remember that our own skills, our own gifts, are just as precious as everyone else. So with that, here ends the Time for All Ages.
I pray you be our eyes and watch us where we go and help us to be wise in times when we don't know. Let this be our prayer when we lose our way. Lead us to a place, guide us with your grace, to a place where we'll be safe. La luce
We now enter the time in our service that we make for our hearts and our spirits, for our cares and concerns for one another. We lift up and hold the joys and sorrows, the cares, concerns, and challenges that we each may be facing. During our time of silence this morning, if you're watching this service on Facebook, I invite you to share any joys or sorrows or significant milestones of your own in the comments. I invite us all to hold these cares in the compassionate embrace of this loving community. Please join me now in the spirit of prayer. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. We know so many stories about you, God, Lord, King, Father, Earth, Mother, Great Spirit, Universe, Holy Parent, Divine Love, Deepest Longings, Covenanted Partner. We know stories about our country and its founding too, the founding of the values we claim as a people. We have stories about those narratives, about how our values have and have not manifested in our reality. Blessed One, we also know so many stories about ourselves, some of them the same stories we tell about others. Beautiful, ugly, simple, difficult, joyous, useful, worthless. Stories about who we are, what we know, and the potentials and the impossibilities of our present and our future. Stories about our purpose and the meaning of our lives. We have countless stories buried too deep in our souls for even us to recognize them. O God of discovery, help us find the strength to excavate these buried stories. Let us lean on one another as we brush them off, hold them up to the light, and find their meaning and use. May our roots nourish us. May they nourish us so we might grow abundantly and flower into blessings for one another and the world. Above all, sing us a gentle lullaby. In the trees and in the wind, in the kind words of our neighbors, in the warmth of the sun and the sparkle of the snow, whisper to us the truest story you know, and sing it to us in notes that we can never unhear. Remind us every day, every moment, that we are beloved. We are beloved. Now let us join in singing the song, Winds Be Still. It's number 83 in the gray hymnal if you have one at home.
Winds be still, storm clouds pass and silence come. Peace grace this time with harmony. Fly, bird of hope, and shine, light of love, and in calm land we'll find tranquility. Birds fly high, lift our gaze toward distant view, help us to sense life's mystery. Fly high and far, and lead us each to see how we move through the winds of eternity. Light shining in, illuminate our inward view, help us to see with clarity. Shine bright and true, so we may join our songs in new sounds that become full symphony.
Our first reading comes from Catherine McTeague, 10,000 Baby Names. When my youngest daughter was about 2 years old, she came across a tattered paperback on our bookshelves. 10,000 baby names. And for a while, it was her favorite book. Drawn to the shining face of the baby on the cover, she brought it to me over and over and demanded that I read through all the names. This was a prelude to what was, at the time, her favorite story of all, how we chose her name. What's in a name? Always, there is a story. You were named for a beloved relative, or, contrarily, named for no one because your parents wanted a clean break from family history. If you were a first son and your family went for such things, you might be called after your father and a junior tacked on. If you were a daughter, you could be named for a virtue or an aspiration, such as hope, serenity, or faith. Recalling some romantic settings, your parents might have named you for their favorite Spanish or Italian village. Perhaps you carry the names of one of their heroes or heroines, or more whimsically, some favorite musician or movie star. Maybe you've ended up with an affectionate nickname born of a sibling's mispronunciation, or some jackass thing you tried as an adolescent and never lived down. Always, there is a story.
Our second reading today is Who Knows You by Kathleen McTeague. Some of the old New England graveyards are serene little pockets of neglect. Their slate tombstones lean at odd angles, and the elegant calligraphy is barely legible, spelling out obscure colonial names like Ozias and Zebulon. Some of the inscriptions that can still be deciphered tell poignant stories of sons and husbands fallen in long-ago wars and young wives lost in childbirth. Clusters of brick-sized stones mark the deaths of children in some catastrophic winter. The engraved cries of lament, "Farewell, beloved daughter," evoke a tug of grief even now, though the people named have been dust and earth for 200 years or more. One of these graveyards in my town evokes a sadness of a different sort, held in the inscription on a modern tombstone marking the resting place of Franklin F. Bailey. He was born in 1901 and buried in 1988, so he lived a long time. His epitaph says simply, "Here lies a man that nobody really knew." What a strange message to leave echoing down through the years, and what a freight of sadness is held in that short phrase. It tells of isolation, loneliness, a life lived invisibly, a voice unheard. Here lies a man that nobody really knew. Who knows you? We each move through the world caught within the bubble of our own mind, circling around each other like small planets on which each of us is the only citizen. Spiritual practices are meant to turn us directly into that inner landscape so we can know it well and without illusion. But their larger purpose is to show us pathways to one another, because with practice we come to know a bedrock truth of this human life. However different each inner landscape is from the others, the same winds blow through us all. They are the winds of longing and fear, doubt, hope, and regret. No one is exempt. That simple recognition opens a deep well of compassion, both for our own struggles and for those taking place behind all the faces that surround us. I wonder about Franklin Bailey every time I take a walk through that little graveyard. I also wonder about the Franklin Baileys who walk among us. Who today is living a life of unremitting loneliness in my town, in my neighborhood, perhaps even in my own family? Before it comes time for a sad epitaph summing up their isolation, perhaps we can extend a bridge of compassion, allowing them to feel seen, heard, and touched, to be known a little in the brief common walk of our lives.
It is a decidedly weird path and process that have brought us together today and for this year. Usually decidedly weird, and this year with the pandemic going on, even more so. It starts out a bit like online dating. We each get our pictures ready and our profile or our record ready. Then the day comes when you start getting to see each other's profiles. Then you mark the little "I like you" box and hope that you get liked back. And if you get liked back, you start learning more about each other, and you share documents and records back and forth and prepare lists of questions that finally, when you get together, on Zoom of course, you get to ask each other. And I have to say, your search committee here was one of the most organized that I've encountered. Not only did they have all of their questions ready and lined up, but they had precise time limits for each one of them. And they made me stick to the time limits too. One of the terms used in the field of chaplaincy is the human document. Now, I admit that I've always hated that term and cringed every time it was used. To me, it feels like it's depersonifying folks, turning them into two-dimensional documents to be read and studied and analyzed. And sure, that's sometimes how we end up first encountering each other, like we have here, but that's only to get the connection started. Rather than human documents, we are living texts, or rather, living compilations of everything that makes us who we are. We are each a collection of experiences and stories and values, as well as the relationships and connections that create the web that surrounds each of us in the world. Our world and our universe are made of stories. The Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis of Middle Collegiate Church in New York City says this about our stories. She says, "I believe our identities are formed by stories told to us, about us and around us. We are living texts," she says, formed by multiple interweaving, competing, and sometimes conflicting stories that we receive from our culture via our parents, other adults, our peers, the media, and congregational life. Stories about race, gender, theology, generational differences, sexual orientation, ethnicity, and class work consciously and unconsciously to form our identity. Stories also teach us values, ethics, and meaning. Stories help us to know who we are and who we are not. I love that line of hers. Stories help us how to know who we are and who we are not. And I would add to this the stories that we are part of, the little and big moments that make up each one of our lives. These bigger stories, those bigger chunks of stories, the milestones, those are the ones that are defining for us, our defining moments and our defining stories. And we have these both at the personal level as well as cultural and generational levels and institutional levels. In the larger scale sense, there are the where were you when sorts of stories. Now, in a way, these vary from generation to generation as to which we're defining moments for that period of time. Where were you when John F. Kennedy was shot? When you heard about Dr. King's death? When the Challenger exploded? Or the attacks on 9/11? And then there are the defining stories that aren't based on tragedy, thank goodness. I'm glad we have some of these too. Radio show and family cars, the civil rights movement, the protests of the 60s, stories of when folks may have gotten their first personal computer or their first internet connection. I'll be curious to discover the defining stories of our youngest generation. There are certainly already several contenders. The 2016 election, the Inauguration Day Women's March, the COVID pandemic, and the many racial justice rallies and actions this year as well. Then there are the defining stories of institutions. UUCB has had these throughout its history, from its very beginnings to the dedication of our current building up in the hills, to the defeating of the Levering Act in California, and many others. Of course, those are often high points, the ones that we like to talk about. But, that's not always the case. In fact, I think the moments that truly define us, the ones that become threshold moments for us, these can be the most challenging moments of our lives. At the very least, they are the ones that involve a degree of the unknown, when we are perhaps encountering something previously unknown to us, or that challenges our beliefs or values in some fundamental way. They usually involve some degree of vulnerability, both as we go through them, but also as we reflect back on them later. Some of these are defining stories that accompany changes in our beliefs. I grew up rather different than how I am today religiously. I grew up as a Southern Baptist in Tennessee. Now, that's Northern Bible Belt, but still definitely Bible Belt. And I was totally into church. I helped teach vacation Bible school. I was an extra in the Passion Play at Easter time every year. I was in the orchestra and then the choir, and I never missed a Wednesday night. All of this, but I never really questioned the interpretations or theology that I was taught. At least not until I got confronted by a dramatically different viewpoint. It was my first year of college, and we were required to take a religious studies class each semester that first year where I was. And it wasn't Bible class like I was used to it. It was religious studies where we applied a logical and intellectual lens to the biblical stories. And it totally blew my mind. Later in the semester, when we got to the Isaiahs and the iconic prophecies for Jesus, this little soon-to-be former Southern Baptist stopped by my professor's office hours, and he patiently went through every single objection of mine to what he'd been teaching and countered them so logically that I couldn't help but agree with him. Essentially, that moment marked the crumbling of all of my unquestioned beliefs. And something else about defining stories, we can often remember the moment they happened with a lot of clarity. I still remember the exact arrangement of his office, the chair, what the chair looked like I was sitting in, what was on the walls. I still remember that moment precisely. There are also the moments that challenge and potentially change our values. While the story I just told you was a belief-changing moment, some of my unquestioned values took a little bit longer than that to catch up with the belief changes. Now, hearing that I grew up as a Southern Baptist in Tennessee, it won't surprise you to hear that where I was growing up was a very anti-gay and anti-LGBT environment. One Sunday evening, our student group had a speaker come to talk about his experience of being a gay Christian. I was primed to question everything at this point. This was about a year or so after that conversation with my professor, and so my beliefs quickly shifted. Within a year, I co-sponsored a referendum in the student election to expand the university's non-discrimination policy to include sexual orientation. And I helped to start the school's Gay Straight Alliance, an advocacy group. And then I was one of the brides in a demonstration promoting the acceptance of same-sex marriage. These commitments were later solidified with the death of a dear friend who I believe never felt it was safe to come out. Both that speaker who came to my student group that evening and my friend's loss are both defining stories for me. We all have defining stories, and I bet they're all different, very, very different. But those defining stories, those stories are what makes us who we are. Our beliefs, our values, our reactions, how we are with one another. The stories that truly define us, they are the ones that come from times of vulnerability. And they may feel vulnerable to share about, somewhat risky to share about. But here's one of the big things about that. Sharing them is a huge part of building relationships together. Sharing them is part of sharing a little bit about ourselves with each other. We aren't just the static selves whose exterior we see around us or whose faces we see just on the screen in Zoom. We are each much more three-dimensional, and we are filled with these moments and these stories. Sharing them with each other is of the blessing that we give one another. For a long time, I signed off my emails with blessings because it seemed like a good thing to say. But then when I really started thinking about why it was that I did that, I realized I had been saying something all along. It's one of my ways of saying that the exchange with the person I'm emailing is a blessing, that our relationship is a blessing, and that I wish them blessings as they journey through their day. And all along, I'd always had a slight pause before I typed the word blessings, as if I was sending the energy of those blessings into the closing of my message. Blessings we share and blessings we give. Celtic poet John O'Donohue makes this beautiful statement about blessings. There is a quiet light that shines in every heart. It draws no attention to itself, though it is always secretly there. Our passion for life is quietly sustained from somewhere in us that is wedded to the energy and excitement of life. This shy inner light is what enables us to recognize and receive our very presence here as blessing. We enter this world as strangers who all at once become heirs to a harvest of memory, of spirit and dream that has long preceded us and will now enfold, nourish, and sustain us. He goes on, it would be infinitely lonely to live in a world without blessing. The word blessing itself evokes a sense of warmth and protection. It suggests that no life is alone or unreachable. Each life is clothed with raiment of spirit that secretly links it to everything else. Let us begin to learn how to bless one another, because whenever you give a blessing returns to enfold you. Whenever you give a blessing returns to enfold you. When we share stories with one another, especially some of our defining stories, the ones that feel vulnerable or risky, when we share them, we bless each other. I have been blessed by many who have shared with me how they came to find Unitarian Universalism or how they came to find something that is a passion area of theirs. And I have loved every one of those stories. Now about how I found Unitarian Universalism. After finding it, I nearly left actually a number of times, but something kept pulling me back. I remember one Sunday when I had one of these pullbacks. I sat in a sanctuary at a UU congregation in a particularly affluent area. As I sat there, I was about to get up and walk away from Unitarian Universalism forever, despite the fact I had just started seminary to prepare for UU ministry. What I experienced there were intentional displays of wealth and class that were nearly pushing me to the edge. Most acutely in that moment, a Burberry coat artfully draped over the pew in front of me to be sure and show its brand. And as I sat there, almost getting to my feet to run out the door, a different feeling swept over me. At first, it was one of not knowing where else I'd go, followed quickly by a reminder that even with all of its faults, even with everything, that this was my home. No matter its downsides, it was my home, no matter what. And so I stayed. And now, after many twists and turns, this brings us to where we are here together. I would love to hear your stories, your defining stories, or even just some of your little stories, whatever you're the most comfortable with. We are just beginning to get to know one another. I've shared a few of my stories here, and now I'd really love to hear yours. In a way, it's a vulnerable time for us all. None of us is really sure what the future will hold, whether it's in our own lives, our families, UUCB, or especially the future in our country, in our world, the future of what this pandemic will mean, or what many of the other challenges and changes will mean. This is the beginning. Every day, every step, it is the beginning of a new path. when we'll be able to not only share stories and blessings with one another, but where I'll be able to join in as we make the next phase of our collective story together. There is a particular power in co-creating stories that is unlike any other. When I was serving as a hospital chaplain, I had a very difficult time with one of the other chaplains. I couldn't connect with her no matter what I tried. And I think she was going through the same thing, that she couldn't connect with me no matter how she tried. To begin with, we were very different in so many ways. But we did have some values in common. But for a while, that wasn't enough to bridge our theological differences. Finally, though, we ended up working together with a family late one night in one of the ICUs as they made some heart-wrenching decisions. She and I sat side by side and did our jobs and supported the family. But in that moment, something else was created too. From that point on, something shifted between us, and all of a sudden we appreciated things about each other that we hadn't seen before. I think that was because we had co-created that experience. We had co-created that story together. We went through a difficult time with an unknown conclusion and made it through, and that took our relationship to an entirely new level. I wonder, what stories will we co-create together? What will some of the moments that we face be, and the uncertainties that we walk through together? To be able to be here and share these times with you is a blessing, and I can't wait to get to know you more. Blessed be.
These days of sheltering in place continue to be challenging for all of us in different ways. We hope you have felt the care and support of this community. And if you're joining us for the first time today, we hope you'll soon come to know what a caring community this is. We also hope that those experiencing financial strain right now will reach out to Reverend Michelle, who can provide assistance from the minister's discretionary fund. For those who do have the privilege of having enough right now, UUCB continues to need your gifts, perhaps now more than ever. Our board and staff are exploring many options to help maintain funding for the ministries and programs we love. But it's going to take all of us digging deep in whatever way we can to support this congregation throughout this pandemic. We also hope that you will continue to practice generosity with our 2020 Good Neighbor organizations. This month, we're sharing half of our offerings with Emeryville Citizens Assistance Program, or ECAP, to support the good work that they do. ECAP was started more than 30 years ago by Nellie Harmon, who recognized the lack of services available to poverty-stricken Emeryville residents. It is a volunteer-run, nonprofit organization that supports our community's health and well-being by providing nutritious food, warm coats and blankets, household items, information and referral services to the underserved in Emeryville and the surrounding Bay Area. Whether you can make an offering of $1 or $1,000 or something in between, all offerings are given and received with gratitude. More details on how to give electronically will appear on your screen as the offertory begins. Thank you.
Please join me in dedicating our offering. We dedicate our offering and ourselves to the mission of this congregation: to create loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service.
It's been so good to be together in worship today. Before we leave worship and head to our Zoom coffee hour, I'd like to encourage you to explore our website, uucb.org, so that you can stay informed about all the many things that are going on here at UUCB. Among other things, you'll find a link to the news page containing the week ahead, which is our weekly email newsletter containing excellent lists of upcoming activities, including contact information. Now, let me highlight just a few important and timely announcements. First, if you're interested in learning to develop AV, audiovisual skills, our worship team is looking to expand and would like to train individuals on how to run a virtual worship service. If this sounds interesting to you, please contact Executive Director Tess O'Riva for more information. Also, there will be a Q&A session today with Reverend Michelle Collins during Zoom coffee hour immediately after the service. This is a great opportunity to get to know our new minister better. Please plan to join us. And now please join in singing our closing hymn, number 336, All My Memories of Love.
All my memories of love hang upon my stars. All the souls I've lost to tears now the autumn jars. And the air around me here thickens with their song. Sing again their nameless tune, sing again and strong. Willows in September touch the water clear, set among the rushes tall of the flowing year. Rising up from sunlit past comes the shadow sigh, running toward me silently, love to fortify. Many are the graceful hearts hung upon this tree, and it seems there's room for mine on these branches free. And the sky above the tree, whether wet or bright, is my ease and comforting, my good news and light.
May we share the blessings we can, knowing that they have the power to sustain someone else. And may we be open to receive the blessings that we need. And may the blessings we have found here be with us as we go forth. And remember, you're never all alone. And now our worship has ended and our service begins.